City budget update and study session on May 8th, 2020. Appreciate everybody who is here. We are doing a virtual meeting in accordance with Governor Gavin Newsom's allowances during this COVID-19 crisis. Public comment will happen in this way. Public comment session. Are we still doing written public comment, Kathy?
No, at this point we are. So I'm looking, Rebecca. Yes,
so public comment will
take either.
This way. At the beginning of the meeting, we will accept any written public comment. Any written public comment that we receive will be read by our city clerk into the record. But we also have developed the capability to do verbal public comment. So we have a number of attendees that are here. When we open the public comment session, please raise your hand, not physically, but on the Zoom chat. You may also raise your hand if you're calling in by doing what, Rebecca? How do they raise their hand if they want to call? On a call?
If they're on a phone, they do *9. Unless they're in the meeting, then on their smartphone, then they still have the possibility of raising their hand.
Great. So do *9, or unless you're on a smartphone, and then you can raise a hand through the app. We've had a number of jurisdictions throughout the country that have gotten what we call Zoom bombed, and somebody's taken over the meeting and shared things that nobody wants to see. If that happens to us, we will shut down the meeting immediately. The meeting will be considered paused at the place where we shut it down. No further actions will be taken, and we will attempt to restart the meeting. If this is not possible, we will go ahead and end the meeting where it is and start at a different time. Public comment, the verbal public comment will work as the same way as if you were in the room, 3 minutes to talk. Please state your name and once acknowledged by the mayor, and you will be unmuted. Great. Other than that, do we want to do the pledge? We always do the pledge. So if we could bring up the old stars and stripes, and we can get our pledge on.
You know what?
Oh, there we are.
There she is. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Wonderful. All right. Pledge is completed, and we'll go ahead and start this meeting. I'll turn it over to you, Kathy, our city manager.
Okay, if we can get the flag down so I can put my presentation up. Latanya, can you take the...
I'm sorry, guys. Hold on one second. My screen disappeared completely.
Latanya, we all know how patriotic you are, and it's totally fine. Give us a couple more seconds of this beautiful flag, and then we'll get to Kathy's presentation. Did we lose Rachel?
No.
Okay, good.
I'm sorry, my entire Zoom.
No, I'm still here.
Okay, good. I didn't see you. I didn't have the widescreen. I didn't want to make sure nothing happened. Okay, good.
We're just going to play this screen on Zoom until the 5th of July, and that's our new celebration.
That's right. Somebody sent me some good ideas about that. I'll have to talk to you about that, Kathy.
Something better than a flag up for a month? Okay.
No, I don't know if it's better than that, but...
Okay.
So I thought that was pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Kathy, you should be able to share now.
4-month Zoom meeting with the flag up.
Yeah, it's creative.
Okay. Very good. Here we go. Good afternoon, Mayor Harvey, members of the council, and the public. Thank you for taking this Friday afternoon so we can have a budget update and study session. This is the beginning of many conversations we're going to be having over the next basically 6-7 weeks on budget. So the items listed here are what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to do a high-level overview, assuming that the council has been able to review the packet. I do want to tell you that staff has been very busy on the last one, responding to the emergency, but 2, then picking up, working on the 5-year forecast, working on budget cuts and the 1920 and year-end estimates, so we can bring you options on that. Looking at the 2021 budget and beginning to put together reductions, the council consideration there. So we've had a meeting with Councilmember Harrington and Councilmember Agramonte so far as the budget subcommittee. And they had some initial input, and we've made some adjustments, and there's some questions here for you based on some of that. We'll continue working with them as we put together the city manager budget and then a series of recommendations for you to consider. Also on the call and answering questions, Sue Casey, our assistant city manager, Lori Decker, who does some part-time work for us and has got 20 years of working on budget and has come in to help with the timeline and work we have to do here. And then also Colleen Ferguson is on as well in terms of if there's capital projects.
Beautiful.
So in terms of the pandemic, we entered this pandemic in March. Council ratified the emergency. We've been operating our EOC since then, and there's been a huge amount of work that staff has been working on to respond and support the community. We've all been adjusting to a new world of essential, non-essential, virtual. We've shifted our operations. And really where we sit now is we are in this pandemic emergency and in continuing levels of uncertainty. So testing as tracing has started, but there still is a lot of unknown. Shelter in place, we're starting to begin to exit some, but as the chart here shows, if we have a spike, we could go back in, and folks that are over 65 will probably remain in for a while. And the whole question about vaccines. So the pandemic is creating a huge, frankly, amount of uncertainty for not just us, but the world. In terms of that then translates to our economic emergency, we are now seeing depression level unemployment. We have a tourism-based economy that's heavily reliant on TOT and sales tax, and the pandemic has basically shut down non-essential travel. And there's great uncertainty about the depth and the duration of this recession. So there are many different forecasts and projections. We've been looking at different folks, but I think the bottom line is this is a new world. This is, as Madeline was saying, a historic moment we're all living through, and we don't know what it's going to look like, and no one does. So we're going to have to make our best assumptions and continue to adjust. Really, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be on a road through uncertainty. The sad thing is in February 2020, we were looking at having the best year-to-date revenues ever since September 2017, since our first fire. And then we had the pandemic. We've been throttling expenses, running the EOC. Our business community has been hugely impacted in workforces. In May and June, where we sit now, what we're working on is adjustments for the 1920 budget. We're looking at a 5-year forecast, developing a reduction plan, and potentially initiating reductions and developing the 2021 budget for council. July and August, what I see moving forward is whatever reductions are made, we will start to implement those reductions, adjusting operations, and be monitoring revenues and business activity, the Chamber and Visitors Bureau. September and October, I see a formal check-in that we're doing a review status. We're seeing what additional reductions or additional changes may be necessary. And again, the next quarter, looking at January 2021, review the status, make adjustments. So the road through uncertainty is going to take some tough decisions. It's going to take flexibility to adapt to a rapidly changing situation that we've all been living through, and readiness to act quickly when required. That being said, I am convinced of our ability to get through this road. But what it's going to take is some balancing of the city's budget. There really are 3 major buckets of policy choices for the council. There's reserves. We're going to talk about that. There's revenues. There's not a lot of places for additional revenue, but we can try to make sure that we have stability for our current revenue. And then we have expenditures. So these are the conversations we'll be talking through today. Use of reserves. In terms of this presentation, there are some policy questions we're going to ask you, and I will come back to them at the very end. But I will be asking council to provide some initial guidance. And again, I don't think all the answers have to be given today because this is going to be a work in progress. But the bottom line of reserves is the use of reserves is a bit of a tightrope. We have to use enough to manage the current need. We need to use them to protect the service levels as much as we can. And then we have to save enough to prepare for continued uncertainty. So we are lucky, though, to have a fairly significant amount of reserves. And I want to give political credit and policy credit to this council and to past councils. But the reality is this chart shows what our general fund reserve is, which is about 8.6 million. There is some additional funds here that is one-time money that comes through fire EMS services that can be used to backfill fire services during this emergency. So you can think of these two funds kind of as a fire reserve. And then there's some one-time money that was set aside for Splash for the swimming school scholarships that council could also consider making some modifications. So overall, if you look at all of this together, it's about 50% of our general fund, a little over 10 million out of our 20 million general fund that we have to help weather this storm. I will tell you there are a number of small cities that have 5 or 10% and that are going to financially be in a lot harder decisions and potential issues in the future than we are. So we are well positioned to be able to be strategic and smart moving forward. So I want to thank the political and policy decisions of this council. This is one of the conversations we'll come back to. Council, basically, you have made some decisions where you've assigned some of your reserves for special projects. This is what we call the special project reserve. You can see on the chart some of the items that are currently in the sign from the beginning of this fiscal year. Some of these projects are no longer in process. We would like to have a conversation with you about whether some of these should be taken off assigned and now put back in the unassigned bucket to be able to be used to help manage this loss of revenue. So we'll come back to this question. The subcommittee did discuss this and they've got some initial thoughts I'm sure they'll want to share when we come back to the questions. In terms of revenue, one of the major policy questions is, should we move forward with the sales tax measure to retain our half-cent sales tax on the November 2020 ballot? This is something we talked about a year ago with budget. This has been kind of the general plan to move this forward. If we're going to continue to do this, we would need to prepare a revenue measure for June for your consideration, so it can be submitted by the first week in August to county elections. The other revenue opportunity for us is cannabis tax. You had an initial conversation about cannabis tax, saying you wanted to do it and set some thresholds. So we will be coming back first meeting in June with some information on the cannabis tax for you to consider. And again, for that to be a tax measure that would come in November per your prior policy direction. In terms of revenue, the high points is 24% of our revenue is from transient occupancy tax, hotel tax, another 30% sales tax. So basically 54% is related to those two things, and that is a significant part of our tourism money. The half-cent sales tax I was talking about, here generates, again, this local measure U is 13%. It generates about 2.5 million for the city. This is staff's estimate of what the revenue loss due to the pandemic is for the current fiscal year 1920. The key assumption in this, looking at transient occupancy tax, is that we will not see our hotels open in this fiscal year. So we are assuming they stay closed through June. Now, if they open earlier, then this will get a little better. But again, when hotels do open, hotel revenue is based on 1, occupancy, how many rooms are filled, and 2, average daily rate. What are they charging for the rooms? And I think we can assume that 1, there will be lower use of rooms for a period of time and lower ADR. We are lucky the world of property tax has already kind of been assessed and collected, and there's a year lag. And then the sales tax, we've had a consultant that's provided us a recessionary assumption. But overall, it's a 2.7 million loss in revenue for 1920. Again, as cities, we have to balance our budget, so we need to use reserves and cuts in order to absorb that, and we'll talk you through that more later in. But the bottom line is this generates about a 13% loss in general fund revenue for the year. Or if you think about just the quarter, we've lost 53% of our revenue in one quarter. For one quarter in that quarter. So the TOT scenarios is probably a place that we're gonna want to come back and talk more about. TOT is 4.8 million, 25% of the city's fund and the city's general fund, And it's large impacts about what can occur. And what we don't know is with the recession, we don't know whether we're going to have a V, a U, a W, a Nike swish. Economists are predicting different things, but this is our most critical variable for revenues. And depending on where we go, it could mean $1 million swing. So right now, this is this was when we put this together about a month ago, we looked at a hopeful scenario that said, okay, maybe we've lost, this is what it is for this year. We thought maybe we'd have 68%, but the reality is it's looking lower. But now we thought, well, maybe 60%, and this assumed hotels opened in June. I don't think this scenario is not happening. What we have right now in the forecast is a middle scenario. The middle scenario overall assumes, again, this shows the loss, the 66 shows the current loss. And it's basically assuming over the year, we're only going to receive 50% of our TOT. This is the most conservative estimate we've seen so far at any other city put forward. It doesn't necessarily mean it's right. And we can talk more about that and try to get more information. But again, trying to be cautious here and then looking at it kind of going back up. The bleak scenario would be that we have a significant, even more severe reduction in TOT. And maybe this looks like we have another peak in September and we enter shelter in place and they close down all non-essential travel again, and your hotels are closed for a period of time. So, or just an overall kind of lower reduction. So we've just modeled a lower reduction over time here, but again, globally. And we've mapped this, we have this by month, but then this really shows what could occur. And the bleak scenario says that hotels basically are not opening until September. So, and then they're kind of how the overall forecast goes. The difference between the bleak and the middle, the forecast right now, again, we have in this middle scenario, but if it actually becomes a bleaker scenario, we actually lose more TOT, then that's additional $1 million loss in general fund that we would want to plan for. So one option on this would be, and this is some of the strategy, is your forecast shows the middle, but maybe you have a next phase of cuts that if this is what occurs over the summer, then you're moving some of those forward. Again, those are conversations for us to have and us to have policy input from the council.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can you so for the middle scenario, hotels open when?
Hotels open July, and they open with 20% of what they would have gotten in a typical July in terms of revenue.
Okay, and then in the bleak scenario, they open in September at what?
Right. And I think that's also, a 20% start in September.
And then which person on staff selected those dates and those numbers?
This was a team effort, but it was my final decision of kind of looking at it. But this was Sue and Lori and I put together kind of a variety of scenarios. Be happy to send. We can show you maybe a little later. We do have a graph that shows you by month. If I go through the presentation, we can pull that up. Maybe Lori can pull that up and we can show you that. Again, this is one of the key questions. And if we want to modify any of this, that's one of the things we can look at.
Okay.
Okay. In terms of sales tax projections, we have a consultant, HDL, and they are our sales tax consultant. They have put together a recessionary scenario. They will be doing another update in May. As you can see, this is what we received from the kind of regular sales tax, and this was the Measure U sales tax for 18-19. This is what happened in 19-20 in terms of a reduction, and then this is what they're assuming kind of going forward. It's all kind of a slow improvement with a recession. Again, they will be doing an update. Another piece here is restaurants are our #1 sales tax contributor. If restaurants do better, it could add another 150,000 or something per year. So it's definitely something that we will need to watch carefully. In terms of expenses, this is the next bucket in terms of how do you manage a city budget. The policy questions here is determining priorities and the level of reductions and cuts. For 2021, what we are going to be building is a budget reduction book. It will have a series of options for you and show what the impacts are. Not only if you make a cut in year one, every cut you make in year one, let's say you reduce 100,000 in 2021, and if that cut is continuing forward, it basically saves $400,000 over the term of the forecast. So there is a strategy to making harder cuts sooner because it helps in your overall management of the forecast. The other question is the phasing the reductions. How heavy do we go in July? Or do you set something up in 2 phases, do some in July and more in October? Again, we'll talk through some of these basic things, but 58% of our general fund is public safety, with 50% being police and fire contracts directly for direct people delivery. And then 20% of the general fund is general city services, planning, building, et cetera. In terms of operating budget, this shows, again, the fire contract, the 5.4. This is the direct contract with Sonoma Valley, with Valley of the Moon Fire Protection District, and then the police contract here with the sheriff. This is 1920, and then the city and other operating costs. In terms of the police contract, this contract for 2021, we have received their the budget increase. The budget for 2021. It is a $520,000 increase to the budget. It's 11%. Our typical police contract has been in the neighborhood of 2.5 to 3 per year, kind of 2.5 over time. So this, before the pandemic, this was going to be a difficult thing to absorb, 520 on top of the 4.6 million. But with the pandemic, we are going to have to look at reductions. And so we are currently looking at working with the council subcommittee, which is Councilmember Harrington and Councilmember Cook, to bring the contract forward, and then also with a series of reductions for council to consider. In terms of fire, the fire contract, if you remember, I want to say in January or so, council, you approved a SAFER grant. This was basically a federal grant that allowed us to add 3 firefighter and EMS paramedics. It basically, over 3 years, the city kind of pays a third and 2/3 is paid by the federal government. So there is one-time money in some of the fire reserves that we could use to backfill and cover those costs. But that is a conversation we're going to want to have with Chief Aker and talk that through in the future as well. And again, in terms of city staff, we'll be having a separate closed session with council after this meeting. So this is just a list of some of the different types of reduction options that are available. And we are putting an overall list together and a budget workbook. And I'll be making recommendations to you as the city manager about what those budget reductions are. And we'll also be reviewing them with the subcommittee in terms of just if we put everything on the table and making sure it's clear in terms of options. So budget reduction guidelines, thinking through as we approach what we're going to have to do, it may be good for council to think, all right, what are some guiding principles that you want to keep in place? One is that, you're going to make some priority and policy driven decisions that there's no sacred cows or no one is immune from having to take some cuts. And that you are going to need some reductions from police and fire as much as you can do and still ensure safety and response needs, obviously, because that is one of the core services that cities provide is public safety. We've got to meet our legal obligations, but there's opportunity maybe be creative or realign some services and continue to keep the public informed as we move forward. And there may be other guiding principles that you want to think through here. This is not something we have to decide today. So in terms of fiscal year 1920, we've done a variety of things. We've have to freeze positions, hiring. We had a vacancy in water fund. We've moved another employee over there to assist and help out. And we've also then been looking at what reductions and what we could do. By the time that we've hit this emergency, it was March, we then hit the EOC April, we're kind of in May and June, you got 2 months to kind of do reductions, which is not a lot of time to have much impact. So in terms of what we've been working on, Again, this is the $2.7 million reduction. It still is a work in progress. Our plan would be to finalize with the subcommittee and bring forward this at the May 18th meeting. We kind of need this set because the question is how much reserves are we using here? How much of these reductions as we look at the next set of putting together fiscal year 2021 budget. So what what we've done here is try really hard to do some hard first cuts in of things that within in-house, and then to try to protect what the reserves are. So you can see globally in terms of reductions, we typically invest in our vehicle. Our internal service funds is what we're putting into information technology, building maintenance, and vehicle maintenance. And you put money aside every year so that when you have to do the big things like a new roof or go buy a new server, you've got money set aside, you go do that. At this point, we've got enough money in these funds that we can not fund them this year and live off what is in those funds. So we're seeing no contribution to internal service funds. There's other one-time things that are delayed or not going to happen this year because we all got sideswiped with the pandemic. And then there's just general reductions as well of cost savings and things that staff has been working on. So there's about 1.2 million in budget reductions, which is about 45%. Colleen Ferguson, our Public Works Director, has put together some recommendations for CIP that she can speak to later when we have a conversation. And then Measure M, based on the emergency, we can take some of the Measure M, and instead of using that for new things, we can use that for baseline services right now. So that the use of reserves of the 8.5 overall reserves we have, we're only using 1.2 to try to really protect the reserves. So this is still a work in progress. Again, if, for example, if hotels opened in June and we got some of this use of reserves would go down, that's what we would happen, or if things get a little better. But at this point, we are being conservative. There are other alternatives and options, but frankly, some of these take some time to put in place. We have a couple of part-time employees that could be a layoff, and that would have to be a separate conversation to be scheduled publicly in a different manner. You could do management layoffs, SEIU layoffs. The way SEIU layoffs were with labor is you can, as city council and management, we have the right to determine if we want to do layoffs, but we have to meet and confer about the impacts. And so that will be a process to sit at the table and work with labor. Also, we have a lot of contracts, whether it's with the Chamber of Commerce, the Visitors Bureau, Community Center, Boys and Girls Club, our rec partners. There's a variety of other contracts that also could be cut now. I guess my recommendation would be to wait and do some of those as 2021, but those are other options. And then again, you could increase reserves if you wanted to, for example, continue to use some of the CIP work. But again, with the end of the year, there are kind of limited options of what we can do, but this is where we currently sit, and we're pleased we've been able to reduce the use of reserves so far.
Can I have questions?
Yes.
And number one, one-time projects delayed or eliminated, are those associated? It's not a lot of money, but is that associated with any projects now that have matching state or federal funds?
No, and be happy to, I think, Lori, if you want to read the list of what those are. These are things that were, some of these were council priorities that we were going to do that we're not getting to because of being diverted with the world of COVID. So.
Okay, that'd be nice to know. And then
we can answer, maybe let's collect that question and we'll come back to that.
Yeah, that would be great. So, and number two, capital improvement projects reductions. I'm asking the same question.
Yep.
Newcomb Bridge, of course, is so important to a whole neighborhood. So is this what you're looking at, or this will continue?
No. Yeah, no change to the Newcomb Bridge at all. So no change to that project. And again, we've got, we can pull up some information and show you what those are. So let me finish the presentation and we'll do that. Thank you.
All right, so number three, Measure M. Is that what Karen Collins was hoping to work with? Was that it?
Measure M is the, I think it was This is the tax measure that was passed recently to help put more money into parks. Within the measure, it basically says if there is an economic emergency, you can use some of that money to kind of run basic park maintenance operations instead of using it for kind of assessments or improvements.
So it's not associated with that at all with Karen?
I know Karen, well,
Excuse me, I hate to say her name, but I'm just saying associated with whatever project that was.
I think I'll call to Karen Collins, had two areas that she was in. She's always been supportive of the county parks and Measure M, and I think helped try to get that passed. And then also there was a broader kind of looking at a recreation project, which is different than this.
Oh, okay. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks.
Okay. And just in terms of so I think that's the only other thing with layoffs council needs to understand is we do layoffs. There are costs in terms of unemployment. There are costs in terms of vacation cash out. So those are things that as we look at any layoffs, we'll put together those numbers as well.
What do you mean there's cost in terms of unemployment?
So if you lay someone off, then the city has to fund a portion of the unemployment as an employer. And so there are costs to the city for that we can, we're putting those numbers together. So so you might save 100,000, but maybe it costs you 10,000 over the year.
I mean, that's not true. If their unemployment account runs empty, every person has an individualized account that's been paid into for their entire working life. And if they exhaust that account, depending on the length of time, you may be stuck with additional payments for that person if those aren't waived by the state. But if they haven't filed for unemployment ever or very infrequently, they should have plenty of funds in their account to fund their unemployment. So I don't know who told you that, but that's not true. Anyway.
So do you want to answer?
So the employees at the city of Sonoma do not pay into unemployment. So it's the city funds it as it comes.
So
we pay okay.
Is that because they're city employees? Is that just kind of like the same thing that happens with Social Security, or is that just a city?
It's a decision that was made by the city at some point.
You can pay over time, or you can.
Sorry. Kathy, can I have access to, I don't see it in the budget packet that Amy and I have. I'm not sure.
We are putting this together. We've not done this analysis. So this is a piece that, and we'll be happy to follow up, but our understanding so far is, again, we would have to self-fund this. And so there will be a cost.
Okay. I just wanted to see if I could get a copy. Thank you.
Are city employees entitled to unemployment?
Yes. Yes, they're entitled to it. We're working on the calculation. So there's a formula that is used, but we'll get that to you.
Okay. So let me shift to the general fund. In terms of the 5-year forecast, again, the purpose of this 5-year forecast is it is a planning tool. So it's not what will be, it's like what would happen if you don't do anything, which we would never do that. So we need to make decisions today that create this kind of long-term sustainability. So I'm not going to read all of these because Council, I know, saw the packet, but these are kind of the forecast assumptions that are in the forecast based on revenues. So again, no cannabis, no federal stimulus money. I will say we've been having, in terms of federal stimulus money, just so council knows, if the stimulus package that was kind of the last one that they started to try to get cities into that was not supported, there was something about, based on the numbers, the city of Sonoma would have received about $500,000 based on that analysis. So to be determined what is going to happen in this next stimulus package, whether we will be included. I know there's a lot of work, there's conversations, but we have to think about it as one-time money and not something that will solve the problem. In terms of expenditures, this has all of the key expenditures and assumptions on contracts and labor. It includes the SAFER grant for fire, as all of our costs, known costs for debt service, pensions, et cetera. And then also includes, assuming we're going to do the same kind of capital investments with the general fund, of about 500,000, what we've done the last 2 years. And again, some of these things may not be possible, and that's why we would be making reductions. But those, again, are policy choices. So this is the draft 5-year forecast. Again, this is constantly changing tool, and this is what it's looking like now based on the information and knowledge we have. But overall, this shows you what the budget was initially, and what we were in 1920. We were using reserves of a one-time in order to help fund our capital projects for 1920. Now it shows projected what with the 2.7 million loss in the revenues, and it shows the expenses. Again, no cuts made in this area. This is assuming, the world hasn't changed, which we know it has. Again, this shows the revenues going out, looking at 2021, a projected loss with medium TOT assumption of 3.3. This would be $1 million worse if you went with the bleak scenario. And again, then going out. I will say the city of Healdsburg has hired a TOT consultant. I thought we were going to be able to get a copy of that and have that be shared with us this last week, but it's still being finalized. So I'm hoping to see it next week. That was about a $6,000 purchase to have someone who does scenario planning for both hotels and cities in Southern California. And if that's something council's interested in, this is such the big swing, having some outside expertise may be helpful. And we could look into that and probably get that within a couple weeks if there was interest. So in terms of then what this means going forward, you can see this is the operating expenditures going up, again, assuming no changes. And then again, assuming what a contribution to CIP. And then this is what the general fund looks like and what the basically deficit is. So if you add these numbers together, it's about a $13 million loss. And we've got about 10 million in overall reserves. Obviously, we will need to make reductions. That's the process that we will be engaging in. This is just a graphical way to see that chart. This shows, again, we were balanced, and this is the 10 million in kind of one-time monies that we had in 1920. And then you can see your operating revenue go down to 2.7. It goes down further in 2021 based on the modest scenario, and then starts with the forecast starts to go slowly back up. Again, this is all based on what kind of a level of scenarios. If we think the recession is going to be deeper or longer, if we think TOT is not going to come back, that changes the revenues and it changes what we need to cut from expenses. You can clearly see that if we did nothing, you can't work in your outer years, you don't have enough money to cover things. And obviously that's not what we would do. So what we are working on is building basically a budget reduction book. And what would occur is this is kind of the gap that we're looking at now. And what we'll do is put together a series of reductions in all the different categories for council to consider. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if you do, let's say you reduce expenses here by 100,000, that 100,000 reduces here. It reduces in year 3, year 4, and year 5. So each making hard decisions up front improves your financial position dramatically going forward. And that's something that we all will need to consider. So again, we'll look at this budget reduction book and have a series of options for a council to consider as we move that forward. So looking forward, kind of the road ahead, we're going to have to keep adjusting our engine and ongoing and monitoring. The good thing about TOT is it's only about a month lag. So, and I think we can even work with the hotels to try to give us as soon as they know so that we can really track closely. Again, we could get a TOT consultant for a modest amount of money, probably $6,000 or something, to give us a better expert advice in this area. And HDL is going to update their sales tax projections this month, so that will help us too. We could also do some work with the Chamber and Visitors Bureau to track things. And again, we may want to establish some trigger points. So we have multiple variables and high levels of unknown. And so we're going to want to be checking and monitoring closely as we move forward. So just to wrap up, just a few overall comments I want to say. Going into this pandemic and economic recession, the city was in a good shape organizationally and financially. We have a small team of employees. We've hired some great staff, and the model of working with contractors and the community with rec partners was very cost effective and has been working really well. So, and I do think we are positioned to have some of the best revenues that we've had in some time, but not if this had not occurred. In terms of revenues, we are clearly reliant on tourism economy. It's not necessarily negative. All economies have risks, but this is kind of the double whammy for us. And cities overall are at kind of the bottom of the food chain. So the state has taken money from cities with loss of redevelopment and taken the old license fee and taken more of general fund to fund schools. And so really what we can rely on is local taxes, and that's our half-cent sales tax and the hotel taxes, which are local and can't be touched. And we're lucky that the community has been supportive of that. I'm very thankful that we have solid reserves to manage this strategically and compared to many cities who are going to be in worse problems. So I really want to applaud council's fiscal conservatism, because I think it puts us in a position to be able to make hard decisions, but still be financially sustainable. So this is, we are a lean operation. We're going to have tough decisions to make. And things are going to affect some of the community character and things that we all love about services and things that we've been able to do for this town. I think the other major impact is going to be, we've been able to use excess general fund to pay for street maintenance and park maintenance, and we're not going to have some of that. So we will be coming forward with a CIP budget. Again, there are other pieces of the CIP budget that are not funded by the general fund, but we'll be looking to try to, and we'll bring you choices on the CIP in terms of what the general fund investment is. So while this is definitely a road of uncertainty, I am confident in kind of our overall team and council and the community and to work through this, and that we will adjust and we will continue to be here to serve. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Mayor Harvey.
I have a question.
Oh, sure, good.
We'll go ahead, Amy and then Madeline.
Okay.
Are there any reductions in the non-general fund revenues for the last quarter?
Non-general fund revenues. In terms of like water rates or that type of thing?
Yeah, so like clean power, for example, the revenue, even though it's residential and commercial, because of the decreased usage, is down. Do we have any, so we've looked at general fund revenues, but for non-general fund revenues, are there any decreases?
Sue, do you want to answer that? We have looked at, like, there are some things, Amy, that like a general fund revenue in terms of like garbage franchise, we get some garbage franchise fees, and we've done some adjustments there. In terms of water, I know before we did the water deferral, we looked overall at where we are and felt like we could do that deferral for the water rates moving forward. I'm not sure I can answer you that detail right now, but you have to talk with the team and see if there's any other specifics. Sue, any other thoughts? We've looked at all the revenue.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't ready for that question, or yeah, we'd have to look back, but I wasn't concentrating. It would only be, the big ones are the water reductions. Yeah, I can't think of any other, sorry. We'll look at that question, sorry.
Don't we have like $18 million a year of revenue that's not categorized as general fund?
18 million?
Don't we usually, what is the amount of revenue we generate that is not general fund?
So there are funds that come in for the capital budget, and we've not looked at the capital budget funding. There will probably be reductions like gas tax. There will be less gas tax coming in this last year. which then goes to help fund road maintenance. So there definitely will be some of reductions in some of those types of revenues. But
Maybe
in terms,
as a follow-up question, not just general fund revenues, but of all revenues, could you give us a report in the next week or so about where we are on the total, not just general fund?
we will look at that information and provide that as soon as we can.
Thanks.
Ellen?
Oh, thank you. Okay. This is just a quick question. I was reading in the paper today about SOS getting 60,000 from the county tourism. Kathy, would you remind me, did we drop out of that and we have our own tourism? Or we don't get
Correct.
that?
Correct.
I wanted to remind myself.
Correct. We're not part of Sonoma County Tourism.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then later, Mr. Mayor, if I might, if there are times for comments, I'd like to do that. But thank you.
Sure, we'll absolutely have times for comments. Councilmember Henley, or Vice Mayor Henley, I apologize. You're good? Okay. Great. We will go ahead and bring this out for public comment. So if you've got, we see one person has got it already. Fred has figured out how to raise his hand. So again, make sure that you raise your hand digitally. It's a *9 if you're on the phone. If not, just pop it up there, and you'll be allowed to make a comment. So let's go ahead with Fred Almbach.
Thank you, Logan. It's a very impressive presentation. It struck me when I was looking at this and looking at some of the numbers that possibly the 250,000 from the splash money could be set aside to an ongoing rental assistance program that would go to fish along with the housing trust fund. In good times, Sonoma's economy ran with the labor of people who made minimum wage, who worked in the restaurant industry and the hotel industry and in cleaning people's houses and gardening. And so I think that it would be a really good move for the city to set aside that 250,000 splash money and then dole that out or meet that out in $50,000 increments like you were doing the rest, so the city will stand in solidarity with the people who are with the city in good times. And I think it would be a good humanitarian and political move to stay standing with those folks with contributions to fish in the future. It seems like that with the solid footing that the city is on, that 250 grand could go for that, and that would go a long way for the city's good reputation. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Fred. Anyone else from the public wishing to make a comment? Did we receive any written comments?
We don't have any written comments, Mayor.
Okay, let's wait a bit on that. Or I guess if we do receive any written comments throughout the meeting, just let me know and we'll pop it back up. We're not receiving comments through the chat on Zoom. Just you can email us at publiccomment@sonomacity.org. And so if you email us with a comment in the next 5 or 10 minutes, then we'll go ahead and read that out. And I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the council. Madeline, you said
sorry,
that
Mayor
Yeah.
Harvey, may I go back? Madeline had questions. Sorry if this is a little dizzy. I think, Madeline, your questions were on this here, correct, in terms of what was included. So
One-time
Lori,
projects.
yeah. So Lori, do you have that information? Can you answer those questions? I know we had notes.
Yes, as far as the one-time projects that were on that list, they include the cemetery analysis, the citywide fee study, EV charging station upgrade, the downtown parking study, and the historic railroad district plan. So that would be deferral of all those projects. And I would just point out that the forecast does assume $100,000 a year in funding for these kind of one-time operating budget projects if they were to be deferred to a later point in time.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead. I apologize.
Oh, no, I was just going to mention, and then Fergie's available to talk about the capital projects.
Okay, so could I just repeat? It's cemetery, city, something.
Citywide fee study.
Okay, and the EV charging, downtown, is that a,
Parking study.
okay, and historic district plan. Okay. thank you.
Railroad district plan.
Oh,
Yeah, and just to be on those items, Councilmember Agramonte, rest of council. So these are items that what we're saying is because of where at this point, we will not have the ability to complete those projects this year. So the money won't be spent this year. It doesn't mean that we're saying that they're not a priority. I think one of the questions for council is on those projects. Which of those projects do you want to continue and have budgeted for the coming year, et cetera. And again, as Lori said, there's about 100 grand in the forecast for those types of things. So that will be one of the policy questions that we'll be putting in the budget book for you to consider. And then Colleen Ferguson, Public Works Director on the CIP. Do you want to speak to those reductions?
I'm promoting her to panelist right now, so it'll be just a moment.
she's promoted.
I have two questions if I could ask them. No, actually one.
Go ahead,
Go
Amy.
ahead while we're waiting for Colleen.
Mm-hmm. So, are there people like developers that owe us fees? And if so, how much outstanding, how much is the value of the outstanding fees that are owed, and what is the plan to collect those fees?
So I don't think I've got that on my fingertips, but we have looked at that as well. And so be happy to send an update to council on that. And we have sent bills and invoices. And so
Do you have a
happy to
range?
provide that information. What's that?
Do you have a range? Is it like 10,000 or like 100,000?
I don't want to quote a number off the top. I apologize. There's so many numbers in my head. I don't want to give out inaccurate information. So I'd be happy to provide that information to council after the meeting.
And then in addition to those, are there any other receivables that we need to collect?
I think the only, we do have on the TOT, we have a couple of hotels that have not, most of the hotels have paid. There are a couple of hotels who have not paid their TOT. A number of cities have done basically a deferral to allow the hoteliers to wait and pay back at the end of June. So that could be something that we could talk about. Again, I would say 95% of our hotels have paid. There are a couple that have not, and they're waiting. The couple that have not, we've been told are waiting for their SBA loan. And meanwhile, at this point, they would be assessed a 10% delinquency.
And then are the fees that were reported to us the 100% or just what's actually been collected?
I think it's, I will need to double check that. I'll need to double check that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, as far as this is Fergie, as far as the CIP funding reductions, the 250,000 more or less listed on the slide here, the project that we have designed and we're ready to move forward with is pavement rehabilitation that was pegged for 7th Street West between West Napa and Spain, including a pedestrian crossing on Spain Street and accessible ramps there at 7th and Spain, and a little improvement of the pavement on 5th Street West, just right next to West Napa. So that project being set aside for now. It is shovel ready. So if there is federal infrastructure stimulus funds available, that project is ready to go with those stimulus funds. But the money we were planning to spend on that project is available, as far as the general fund share, and the balance of the funding from other non-general fund sources is needed for other projects, so that those projects don't need general fund. So that's a major change to a project that was ready to go. The other one is stormwater trash reduction systems. Our city stormwater permit requires us to put in systems to stop trash from getting into waterways and getting carried to the bay ultimately. So we are under a mandate to put in these stormwater trash reduction systems citywide. We had set 100,000 in the CIP budget for this year to start doing that. We're not going to have a project ready to deliver, and we will have to do those projects in the future.
Really unfortunate about the crosswalk. I know that neighborhood really wanted that.
And
They have talked to me quite a few times about that.
Yeah.
I know Colleen and I had conversations. That's too bad. Okay.
thank you.
Oh, and just one more point, getting to Councilmember Harrington's question about development fees. So the Mockingbird Lane project has paid Quimby Act funds, and it's those funds that are supporting the work that's ongoing to get to construction of the bridge over Friar Creek at Newcomb.
Great.
Oh, I'm sorry, was that you, Councilmember Ingram?
No, that was just being yippee. I'm happy.
Okay.
I don't even live in that neighborhood, doggone it. And I just am so excited about that for kids.
Does anybody have any other comments?
I do have comments.
Get after it, Madeline.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, whenever it's appropriate.
Right now.
Okie dokie. So, first of all, I can't answer Fred Olebeck's question, but I will say I'm on the Splash Committee, and we understand about the 250,000 that's been set aside. And I think Paul Favreau is interested in speaking to Kathy. I think they understand, the urgency of having funds, and they're very open to, to changing that. I can't speak for Paul or the board, but I know that Kathy's aware of that. So I want people to know that we are open to that idea. We appreciate the funds that are there, but we know that, we can have a different type of a contract with the city. So the other thing is, I talk about this quite often. I hope nobody rolls their eyes. I can't see everybody. But the other day we were talking about Broadway, and I didn't vote with Rachel Hundley, but just because, and I apologize about that, but that was with the Broadway project. But the point that Rachel makes, I think she was trying to say there's a bigger future than paving. And that's one of the things I was concerned about. So the reason I'm bringing this issue up is I talked to the council about city business and people business. And because of the delays, whether it's funding or staff, we still have no protocol for the bench program. We still have no solution to the parking issue behind Mary's Pizza. And the park program I asked about earlier with respect to funding and information for, projects or something for the city, for the parks. Those things need some be, even though I know these are very difficult times, we cannot forget these things. This is people business. Every one of these issues is people business, and they keep getting rolled down the road. And again, I understand this, but you know what? I don't know what this involves in funding and staff. What are the issues that continue to have these things go down the road? I don't need the answer, but I just need whomever is listening to understand it is so important that we don't ignore people business in this city. I'm done.
Can I go? Thank you, Madeline.
Yeah.
So with regard to how I think we should proceed, I want to start by saying I think we can't have another episode where we're months into something and we find out that we're $3 million short of where we wanted to be. So I think we need at least every 2 weeks a financial update, because we can't just be put in a position where the only option is spending our reserves. The amount of reserves being spent are quite a bit of our operating reserves. So we have almost $3 million shortfall, and we're making that up with $1.2 million of our reserves. And that it was, when we were first shown this earlier this week, it was $1.75 million, was basically 50% of our operating reserves. So I think that's a problem. I don't think we should be spending more than 10% per month of our reserves to backfill our budget for however long that takes us. That I think should be the maximum. And that we should figure out what the programming can look like after we know what the financial situation is, and not vice versa. I don't think we should figure out programming and then figure out funding. We should figure out what is a reasonable budget in the time we're in, and then what can we afford to do with those funds. And then on the issue of the cemetery specifically, you know, we have a ongoing liability that is a fiscal responsibility matter. And also, if there is to be a spike in the future, as is predicted by many epidemiologists, I think it makes a lot of sense to make room in our cemetery. So I think that's a great idea. And then I would just say, I think the most severe proposed case, I think, is exceptionally rosy, that somehow in September we're going to be on a path back up. I think we need a model that is a lot more cautious than that. I think almost everybody has said that a second wave is expected in October. I don't know that that's planned into this. The scenarios are too rosy. The difference between the best case and the worst case scenario is $800,000. I don't think that's makes sense to me. But I do think we should pick a percentage of the reserves that can be spent every month and figure out what the budget looks like. I would say that we should use a more conservative scenario in terms of the length of time it will take to recover from this. That's all I got to say.
Thank you for mentioning the cemeteries. I was afraid to say it, but thank you so much.
What is the current monthly percentage of the reserves that we're spending?
Well, right now the proposal is to spend like close to 50% of the operating reserve. That's the proposal.
Over the course of how many months?
Well, I think
Right now.
the other, sorry, I guess the other way to look at this is, you know, I'm sorry, there's two ways to look at this. What we're talking right now is 1.2 use of reserves. If we go back up to the reserve sheet, sorry if this makes you all busy. You got 1.2 million. You currently have, you can either just, our thought is that we're trying at this point, keep these reserves. And what you'd be doing is basically pulling the 1.2 from your unassigned reserves. And maybe there are some assigned reserves that you could decide you don't need anymore and they come up and use here. Your other option is you're pulling from, you could take the 1.2, you could pull it from your operating reserve. So it's all the same bucket of money. But I think, you know, there are a series of reductions that we can look at. They will be significant to this council and community to ensure that we can preserve some of these reserves and going forward.
I just want to say the issue isn't preserving the reserves for perpetuity. The issue is that if this economic down, whatever words you want to use, persists for 2 or 3 years, we want to be at the end, not on zero. And so we can't spend all the gas in the first month. And so $1.2 million divided by 8 million, that's if we took all of our reserves and threw out all of our reserve policies, didn't just spend the operating reserves. If we did that, we would be spending 15% of our operating reserves in the first quarter.
Right. I hear that.
Our burn rate's going to be a lot higher in the first few months than it will be in the later months, right? So it's going to make sense that it's going to be a little higher now and taper down over time, because even if we start to talk layoffs, there's 3 months of basically severance pay that we pay there. So we'd be paying it full tilt for that long. There's the unemployment piece that Sue talked about. So our burn rate is higher in the front end, it gets lower on the back end. And I agree with you that I think we are looking at this a little bit too rosy. I don't think that July is likely for hotel openings. September maybe, but at very low capacity.
So the one thing I will, again, just using what we've had here though in terms of revenue is kind of, we fell off a cliff, right? This was not foreseen. We fell off a cliff. We've lost this quarter. That is what unforeseen emergencies, that's really, what you wanted, what the reserves are there for. And now what we need to do is basically look, I agree with you, Councilmember Harrington. The question is, how much do we want to have at the end of the 5 years? And that becomes a trigger. And if you want to try to, in terms of getting through this, and then that then sets how much, what is the level of cuts you have to make. So you have to put a pin somewhere. You have to put a pin and say, all right, this is the max of reserves we're going to put in. And therefore, then you have to look at reductions to do that backfill. Because there's going to be very modest revenue opportunities.
It's over what period of time is a relevant question. So I was proposing then 10% of the budget be funded by the reserves forward going. If we spend at the current rate 15% per quarter, then in a year we would have 0 reserves. And so, maybe that's the plan, is to have nothing in a year. But I'm seeing that this is an situation where we require supplementation from the reserves for probably 3 years. And so if you take 3 years and divide it by the amount of reserves, then, you could figure out what percentage of your budget could be backfilled by the reserves. I'm suggesting that we not have more than 10% of our budget forward going after figuring out what cuts are going to be made, be supplemented by the reserves. I mean, also there's a question about should every single reserve go into operations? I don't know that that's appropriate, but okay, let's say we used all of them, $8 million. Then we should figure out what percent of our budget do we want to supplement with the reserves each month, I think.
Yeah, so Councilmember Harrington, and this is, there's work in progress that on the 2021 budget that will be happy, that as we work through, you'll be able to see. But part of what we've been working on in some of the different scenarios is looking at how do you make a series of cuts, number of hard cuts this for 2021 that then basically allow you to, the goal is to, at a minimum, at the end of this, have a chunk of your reserves left because we don't know if we're going to have another fire, right? We don't know, so we cannot use, and I want to be clear, it was not staff's intention to basically use all our reserves to protect things in the first year or two. That's not what we're thinking. We're putting together a variety of cuts, some painful cuts, and we'll be sharing that with the committee. And the goal is to make sure that we do have reserves at the end of the 5-year window and enough reserves that we've got flexibility. Now, if you go with a bleaker scenario, it will become tougher. There will be potentially need for more reserves and more cuts. I will tell you again, the devil's in the details as you start to look at the cuts. But that's the process that we're going to go through. It's kind of a, it's a 3D puzzle. Here's the cuts and here's the reserves, and you keep tweaking, and then it comes to a point that you start to feel comfortable. But that will be the process that we'll be looking at, and it is going to require significant changes in staffing and in service levels.
Well, I guess the question is about this meeting. Is the purpose to report to us that we must spend this money and make these cuts, or is the purpose to say we are working on things and this is an interim update? That's the question. So I'm offering a policy direction of what percent of reserve should be used, but it sounds like you want to address those issues at the time of the budget. What is the specific direction you want, or are you just reporting?
No, I think let me go to what we were looking at. I think part of it is, Councilmember Harrington, is kind of general use of reserves. So these questions, I'm not sure that setting a target right now, without kind of some of the a little more detail. I think one thing would be important for us. One thing I think we could set up a model that we could say, okay, here is a trigger where now if there's a 10%, or your other option, you could do an amount per, but the reality is you've got some years you're going to need less, some years you may need more. But the goal is at the end to still retain, or to set a threshold, you don't want your reserves to go below X. Yeah. So there's different ways to set the scenario. of what we want to do it. I mean, the general sense, and I think our thought was to bring back and work with the committee of look at some options. And there may be different ways we can create triggers or targets. And without kind of looking at the details of some of the reductions, I'm just worried that part of this is a little bit flying blind. And that if you say, I want to do 10%, and then maybe for 2021, you really need to use, 13% because you want to wait, and some of the reductions you want to wait, maybe you don't want to do till January. Again, and maybe you don't, but it is a 3D puzzle of seeing kind of what the cuts are too. And so the general use of reserves, what I'm hearing so far from council members, again, I'm not hearing, I still need to hear from, I think, Rachel and Logan as well. But there is the balance act of wanting to preserve and protect. And that was a theme I was trying to communicate, that is staff's perspective as well. So that we're not burning through this at a rate that we can't sustain. We've got to have reserves because the level of uncertainty is high. So I think we are in philosophical agreement. I think there's some devil in details we got to work through.
Just to be clear, I actually think we should use the operating reserves first, and that's the purpose of those reserves. And so I support the operating reserves.
Okay.
I want to give Vice Mayor Hunley a chance to jump in.
All right. I will start with reserves. Am I unmuted? Yes. So my thought is that after 2 years, if we are in a position where we still need to supplement our budget with reserves, then we haven't made enough cuts. So I would only want to rely on reserves for up to 2 years, and also figure out what our threshold is that we want to keep in our pocket for future disasters like fires, so that we know going into it what the floor is, so then you're not just suddenly one day having cut it off. I concur with the suggestion of starting with the operating reserves. I mean, I think I could see it being a combination of the three, but this is one of the reasons that we have it. We're lucky that we did not have to go in 2017. Santa Rosa in 2017, they used their entire reserve, but they also built it back up for this next disaster. So that's about reserves. Generally, in light of the uncertainty about when hotels are going to open or when people are going to want to come back to hotels, I like the idea of, I think I would like a more pessimistic picture to see, like a worst case scenario. I'm not assuming that's where we need to go, but I think that it'd be nice to have that in our brains. And then as it's executed over the next year, and I don't know how frequently, we'll have to go back to it. It might be something that, every other month we have to figure out which path that we're on, but it needs to be something flexible where we don't, take like an extreme amount of things away and end up not needing to, but then also in a position where it's sort of like escalating or starting in the middle, and then we adjust up or down as we can get a better idea of the future. Yeah. And going to what Madeline was saying about people business, I think it is going to be challenging, like thinking about the things that are the absolute essential services that we need to, put at the very top to keep the city literally operating, but also have room for, because life keeps go on living. And I don't think that we should totally put everything on hold just because of this uncertainty, because there will be another one. So in figuring it out, perhaps things that are more time consuming than they are costly, things that we could add to the list, but I do want to keep that in mind. As far as personnel, we did not have any layoffs in the last recession, and I would like to avoid that in this circumstances, considering we didn't really have a lot of extra, and it was really keeping us from getting the basic things we need to get done. And yeah, and then the other big piece of it is just having to prioritize. And there's going to be some things that we really like that just are going to have to be either put on hold or taken off the list for a couple years. And I'm ready to make some sad choices. But I think this, going back and considering what are truly our essential duties, and then building from there is going to help. And then the last piece, I know one of the allocated reserve funds is for the general plan update, which has been presented on the chopping block, which I can understand part of that, and we'll get there when we talk about it. But what's happening right now is a really great time to have some serious conversations about our economy. I talk to all the other cities in the county weekly, and a lot of them, they're all getting cuts, but they have different tax bases, and they just aren't as concerned about it. The closest city to us is Healdsburg, and even they have a more diversified economy, and so they're not going to get hit as much. I think we're probably going to be hit the hardest city in Sonoma County. The only other city I've heard that's like us is Napa, who's in the same boat. So they're having the exact same struggles. But so one of the things that we talked about for the general plan update was doing an economic study, because we haven't done one of those in 20 years. So that is one piece that I would hope is not cut, because I think at this point where things are sort of revealing our weakness as a tourism predominant economy, it could be a good opportunity to think realistically about the future and how we can make ourselves a little more stable.
Okay.
Thank you. That's interesting.
So for me, I mean, I think I'm pretty pessimistic in terms of what the next year, 2 years, 3 years is going to look like. I think there's real damage that we aren't seeing that's being done to middle-class families and to especially people who are working in the service sector. I think there's going to be a long road to recovery. And it seems to me that the state and local governments are taking, and appropriately so, a conservative view with coronavirus as far as public safety is concerned and keeping things closed. And I think that there's going to be large reactions to any sort of spike. And I think we should be assuming that that's going to happen. Also, given how much travel comes in from other states, it's not just how well the collective Bay Area does, it's how well Georgia does and Florida does and Texas does and New York does and all the rest of it, because those are our principal travel locations. People that come to visit us, and really how well the world does can all lead to a significant spike here in Sonoma County. I don't think we're going to see hotels open in July. I'd be very, very surprised by that. I think we can take that off the table right now. I think September may be possible. As far as a policy question, number 5, I'm supportive of being heavier earlier. My view is I'd rather adjust expectations to a more rosy scenario than adjust them to a more bleak. I think that protects us long term, and I think it keeps us, it's easier to adjust in that direction than the other. I think we need to talk about the Casa Ignacio property match. I think that money needs to maybe be freed up. I agree on trying to diversify the economy so that we're better protected from these situations. I'm not quite sure how that works, but interested in the process and not quite sure how expensive it is. I mean, since I've been here growing up and everything else, it's pretty much always been a tourist-based economy. And we had the Sonoma Cheese Factory, which was a bit of production for a while, but that's since left. It's agricultural tourism is pretty much what we've been doing for quite some time, since the rock quarry stopped being a thing. So, especially within city limits. So yeah, those would be my comments. I'd like to be conservative with reserve spending as much as possible. I think our burn rate's going to be, as I mentioned, our burn rate's going to be a lot higher in the front end, and then it's going to kind of decrease over time. I do think we're going to see federal money come our way. I do believe that, but I understand the unwillingness to put that in there as a likelihood, just given what we've heard out of the Senate. I just think we're going to hear a lot of cities throughout the nation in Republican and Democrat controlled states in similar fiscal situations as us. So yeah, I think this is a long-term wave that we're on, and I think we're going to have to make some pretty painful cuts. I mean, the good news on reducing a certain amount of services is if we're in the midst of a recession, there's probably going to be significantly less demand for things like building permits and stuff like that. So maybe we'll be a little better off, or maybe it'll balance out in any way. I think we got to take a clear and real look at our police and fire contract, and I'm glad to hear that we're doing it. It's a significant portion of our budget. But I also think, public safety gets a little more important during recessions, especially one that's hitting, it's going to force people out of their homes, and people are going to be feeling a lot of individual financial pressure. So I think public safety becomes important in those situations too. Those are my basic comments as far as this goes. I think we gotta look more pessimistically. I think we gotta cut early. And I think we gotta try to be ready to ride this out for a long period of time.
Can I add a few more? I didn't get everything on that list.
What's that?
I have a few more comments. Looking at the things on my list, you've reminded me about federal money. I think that there will be state and federal. I don't think we should plan on it, but I think it goes to our plan being flexible enough to adjust if we do get money, which I hope we do. And then also on the infrastructure side, identifying places where our typical way of financing things could be replaced by the infrastructure funding, which will be coming. I don't know if it'll be available to us, but that's going to be a possibility. And one more thing on the employment side. My employer, in lieu of doing any layoffs, took a strategy of 3 months ago, the executive management all took 40% pay cuts. Then the partner level took 30%. And then by the time they got to me a month ago, and gave everybody else a 20% pay cut, it seemed a lot less painful because all of my bosses had already taken a larger pay cut for me. And so I think that perhaps there could be a management opportunity to lead on this and take a voluntary temporary reduction. And then on the list for the sales tax measure, I think we should move forward. I think most, if not all, of the cities in Sonoma County are going to be having financing measures on the ballot. And I know that there's going to be some competing stuff, probably at the county level, perhaps the state. But I think that, hopefully people will look to local first, and, as they decide how much appetite they have for financial measures, hopefully realize that our sales tax measure is vital for our city. And then, let's see. And then as far as like phasing, I think I'd like to start in the middle and then have a plan for in some period of time in the next quarter to either take a step down or take a step up.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Hundley. Yeah, I also support going out for the sales tax measure. I think that's important. Keep them at the level where they're at. I encourage as much money to be spent as possible on once hotels are allowed to open, on encouraging visitors from the Bay Area to come. I think there is some optimism there that we are close to the Bay Area, where a lot of tech companies have not had to make layoffs, and those people are flush with cash and looking for places to go. So I think that there may be some benefit that can happen there, but it's fine, Lauren, just go. And my roommate's walking out. Uh, it's fine. They come home when I'm in meetings and they like crawl. My wife and my roommate crawl to avoid it. So this is one of the reasons I have to turn my camera off on occasion. So yeah, I think there could be some optimistic things that could happen there, but I really do think we got to plan for more pessimism. Pay cuts over layoffs for sure, if it makes sense financially. I don't know those numbers well enough. I'd rather keep our staff. I think, we built a really solid team that is working hard and working well. But if it's necessary, I mean, we've got to protect the city as the number one entity. But if we can do pay cuts over layoffs, I would also support that to try to keep as many people on as possible. And it would be better too to pay people to be working at the city rather than paying them for 3 months to not be producing for us. So in a number of ways, it's better. Yeah, I think that sales tax is crucial. We've just got to make sure we can, and I think we have a good argument to make. I think we do a lot, and I think we've got good reasons that people should support it.
But and I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I think you're absolutely right. And the comments that I've heard are heartwarming. I really think so. What we need to do is leave something for the future. We need to know that there's something in the future for all of us. And, we just have to be careful how we craft this communication, because I think it's important that there is an afterlife here in Sonoma, and there are just certain things that our businesses have to face, as well as all of us. So I just want to make sure that we keep that eye on the prize, 2022, 23, something like that, and we don't lose sight, because we're in this horrible position right now.
I absolutely agree. And I am encouraged the discussions that Rachel and myself are having with the business community and the chamber, and the creativity of our business community is really positive, and the flexibility that we're seeing from the city to try to do as much as we possibly can to make things work and make any amount of opening as successful as possible is encouraging. And we do want to save every single small business that we possibly can. That's one of the big things I'm afraid of in this, is that we lose our small guys and we keep all the big fish. And I'd rather not see that happen in Sonoma, and I think we can work to prevent that. But yeah, we got to keep pressure at the federal level to try to get federal stimulus money. I do think it's going to happen. I really hope that it will happen. But that's crucial. So if you're listening to this, call your Congress people, get them to keep printing that money machine and helping us out.
Yeah, and Mayor Harvey, just so that council's aware of this, the 6 cities in Sonoma County have joined to hire a federal lobbyist to help advance our communication there. It's been very helpful in terms of information. And the total cost for that for us is about $4,500 for 8 months. So it's a very minor amount of money to have a direct link to a lobbyist who, this is the same lobbyist that's going to work in Harvest Santa Rosa. So they're sending information to us directly about a whole variety of things and advocating on our behalf. And we'll be working on another letter to collectively be sent from the mayors of the Sonoma cities back to the legislature as well. So that's a piece in progress. Mayor Harvey, I would like to, can we go to, I did not hear from Councilmember Agramonte or Councilmember Harrington about the sales tax measure. So could I hear maybe a response from them on that? Because
Madeline's got her mic off, so let's start with Madeline and then we'll jump to Amy.
Sure. I mean, I think that we should move forward on it. I'm not afraid of it. I think people know that what they're supporting really is valid, and I'm okay.
Councilmember Harrington.
I mean, it sounds like the majority wants to do it. I don't have a problem with putting it on the ballot in general. I'm opposed to sales tax. It's a regressive flat tax that penalizes poor people the most. And it's paid 70% by the people who live here. And now that tourism is down, it's going to be the percentage of people that pay it that are local are even higher. So I fundamentally, on a policy level, don't agree with funding the government based on flat taxes. So I'm happy for you to put it on the ballot if there's a majority for that. but I think, but anyway, I don't object to it being put before the voters.
All right.
Okay. And then I do want to go back up to the reserve, the assigned reserve. I'm wondering if on this chart here with council, if there are some items here that you are comfortable taking off assigned and putting in unassigned. And so I don't know. I know that Amy and Madeline talked about this a little bit. There are some pieces that this, for example, this Broadway affordable housing, this is not going to be needed. This was the original 100,000 construction loan for Broadway. They only used 75. And have now paid us back.
Yeah. So the Castañaso property, they don't need it anymore. So I don't even know, we could reassign that. I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah.
Because that deal fell through. But I also think that I hope the direction was that we're going to use our operating reserves first. So
I actually, no, I heard that. I think it's helpful if there are things on this list that are really no longer committed, council commitments, because really what this list is at the beginning of budget last year, these were things that you wanted to commit funding to. If the projects no longer exist, we should take them off. It should go on unassigned. And then I agree, and I'm fine with pulling money from the from our 17% emergency reserve. I mean, the advantage of doing that is if we do get federal money back through that one time, you could use that to pay that reserve back. I mean, that's kind of a very clean way, or at least partially pay it back potentially. So this question, this project I think is no longer, so this 500,000 could potentially go back to unassigned. Council needs to have a policy conversation about the general plan reserve. And I've asked David Storr to we've got the housing element coming up. I know Vice Mayor Hunley's talked about the ED strap plan. Again, and then we've been working on the development code. So I think this is a broader conversation that's not kind of agendized for a deep conversation today. So I think that comes back as a separate agenda item for you to talk more about really what is your work plan for the general plan for the next 2 to 3 years? And then what funding do you want to preserve and protect for that? This 25,000 is, the project is no longer needed.
And on the UGB reserve, we talked about that in the subcommittee, and I asked you for an estimate from Jeff about how much his work would cost. Do we have that yet?
Yeah.
I don't have that yet. We did get the estimate to take it to the voters is about $10,000. And I have not had a chance to talk with Jeff yet about the UGB, his costs. But it's basically, the measure is basically written. There's a working draft now. And so I don't think there's a lot of work, again, if council is comfortable with that when it comes back after the public input. So the plan was to bring that first meeting back in June, finalize the UGB. There's a little bit of extra work then of what needs to have to prepare it for the election. But I don't think that's a lot of money. My gut is there's probably $5,000, but I will confirm that with him yet. So the other way to do this is not pull it from reserves, and we just program it as it's frankly a cost that would be happening in June. And then there'd be some legal costs that occurs in August as he has to write there's a number of, he's write kind of the legal opinion, and there's some work that happens in August, but that would be part of kind of operating bills, typically for the city attorneys. So I think this one and then the 10,000 for the election, again, we could put that in operating because that's frankly what we should do for next year. So I think this 100,000 could potentially be put back in unassigned, and we just program the costs because they're expenditures that are going to be occurring this next year.
I think it makes sense to start with the Castañaso money and move that. General plan, I'd like to wait to see what that actually looks like. And then the rest of them, the way you describe it, UGB makes sense. The other ones are so small, it seems like I don't really see a reason to touch them right now until we're back down to the bottom of the barrel, which in case I hope it won't be.
The only other piece I would say, I left these on here because they're frankly funds that, this hardscape maintenance fund reserve was left from aligning a landscape decision that the council made in 2007, 2008. And it was supposed to kind of gone back and it was just kind of left there floating. So partly I left this here for transparency because it's been on our audits. But the direction before was that this money was going to be put back in the general fund. So that was the direction of the prior council when they dissolved the lighting landscape assessment districts, and we've been able to pull those records up and look. So I think this is really a transparency issue. I would take this money, just should be at this point going back in general fund. The El Calde Trust, this is a small amount of money. We could just program this next year to help fund the El Calde event, which typically is about $4,000. So that would just be help that. The computer loan program, we think what happened here, and this is what cities did sometimes, they would put in maybe a one-time amount of like $50,000 to seed an account that they would use and they'd run for employees who are purchasing a computer and then paying back over a 2-year period. This is way more money than we would ever need for that purpose. And literally in the last 2 years, I think 3 years, we've had 2 employees take advantage of this program. So it is just overfunded, and we could do it in a different way. So these fundings here, staff believes, I did this as a point of transparency, but we think we can move these back in. This 25,000 is no longer needed. Staff believes we should keep some fiscal analysis money. We can talk about that more later. The UGB reserve, you can either pay for some of your current costs and next year's costs out of reserve, or you can just program them. It's kind of 6 of one, half dozen the other. And I would not touch the general plan reserve at this point until you have kind of a broader work plan and policy conversation.
Well, with that, it seems like all those small things that are relics, it might as well. Also, I didn't know we had a lighting and landscape district. That's nice.
Well, it was dissolved.
Yeah.
It was dissolved right before the last recession. I think there were 2 or 3 areas. And then like right before the recession hit as they dissolved it and that money went away. Is there a general consensus for my recommendation, which would be in terms of assigned reserves, keep the general plan, keep the police fire, but the rest of these would roll back into unassigned? If you want to keep the UGB, you can, but I think we can program that into either current costs or next year's budget.
This is Madeline. I think the general plan is very important. What will people say about us that we were dead at the switch? I don't want to be part of that.
Yeah, I think the general plan obviously is extremely important, but we've had a lot of discussions that the focus really needs to be on development code and that we have a high quality general plan. So we should be taking a look at that money.
Again, I'm not recommending any change to the general plan reserve. That would stay assigned at the 500,000, and then you would have a separate conversation at a future time. And I'm also recommending you keep the assigned for the fire fiscal analysis, but I think the rest, based on kind of real need, could go back into your unassigned reserve.
Okay.
Any concerns with that recommendation? Okay, we'll take that as a way that we'll refine the reserve in that way going forward.
Do we need a vote on that?
No, it's a study session. You're going to formally vote when we bring the budget, but we'll start to show when we bring you the budget, we'll show you the reserve, and it will look different because you've given us kind of general direction here, and then you will bless that formally at a formal meeting.
Okay.
Okay. I think I've got the direction that I was looking for in terms of the questions, a high level. There will be a lot of work to do, has been a lot of work occurring, and there'll be more work to bring this forward. Again, what we're probably looking for at May meeting, I'd like to bring the 1920 reduction package so we can kind of get that set, because then that really helps. We have to start taking this jigsaw puzzle and start putting some things down and gluing them down. And then that creates some assumptions as we're moving forward on other pieces of the 3D puzzle.
Just to recap kind of what I heard and just to see if you've got congruence with that, I think there's kind of a general feeling that operating reserve should be kept first. There's the kind of removing of some of that money that costs Miasto and the assigned money back in and reprogramming. Support for moving forward with the sales tax measure. I think there's a general feeling that we need to be a little more pessimistic as far as cuts go, and as far as the general forecasting goes, is a feeling that this is going to go on for a longer time, and we need to cut. I'm not sure what I heard on number 5, whether we need to do heavy in July. I was supportive of heavy in July. It sounded like Rachel was supportive of kind of a more medium strategy now that we can adjust over time. So I'm not sure. It sounded like Amy was a little more pessimistic. I don't know where Matt landed on that.
I think we should do the cuts up front.
So Amy's more supportive of a heavier in July upfront cuts. Do Rachel and Madeline want to weigh in just so we have clarity there?
As I said, I wanted to start off somewhere, in the middle, maybe a pessimistic middle, and then have a plan for a subsequent step where we either proceed to go down and make more cuts, or we're pleasantly surprised and we can reverse course or stay the same.
So this is Madeline. I think more so in the beginning, because then we can always put the money back where it was. If it was more positive midway, and maybe even the third phase. So I would say I'd go up front.
So general support for upfront, it seems like in July, and then guidance and council wants to provide for this budget reduction effort. I think we've kind of, there's a general. That for all this.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask, could somebody remind me of the money for Castañazo? I'm sorry.
$500,000.
Okay, thank you.
And that the idea is to reprogram it to unassigned.
Thank you very much.
Of course. Great. Is that
Great, thank
kind
you,
of what you
Council.
heard? Kathy?
No, I appreciate this is very helpful, and I appreciate the feedback. It gives us a policy direction to continue to bring and work on the budget, and we'll be doing a lot more work on this collectively.
So could Kathy, do Amy and I have to meet later? No, that's done.
No, I think we still, we're going to want to meet again on the budget reduction package. I think the 1920, what we'll do is we'll be taking,
No, I mean right now? No.
We're still doing it closer.
No, we have a brief closed session after this, but what we'll be doing for May 18th, we'll continue to kind of refine, but again, we will be bringing on May 18th council meeting a resolution for the budget reduction package for this current fiscal year.
Okay.
And then we will be working on the budget reduction kind of workbook. Then we'll work with council member Agramonte and Harrington, kind of preview kind of how that looks, make sure it's clear, make sure that we've got kind of enough options and tiering for council to consider. And then we will be looking at the actual scenarios in a more pessimistic scenario for TOT.
So
and overall, I think length of term.
Mr. Mayor, do we stay on now because there's something at 2:57, or what do we do?
Yes, so if I could.
Sorry.
It's all right, Councilmember Agramonte. So what we need to do here is on open session while we're here,
Close it?
open the closed session, take public comment. We will then close this Zoom meeting, and we will go into a separate Zoom meeting for the labor closed session.
And then do we have to open this meeting up again to do it publicly? To close them?
No, it's the next item on the agenda. You can just move to, is there next item on the agenda is we'll be going to closed session for labor negotiations, and is there any?
But when we come out of closed session.
He's asking about the report out.
Yeah.
No, there will be no report out.
So we just stay on? That's what I'm hearing?
We stay here for a second, and then there's a second link that we're going to go to after this.
Oh, okay.
But we don't have to come back to this. We just close in closed session.
Thank you.
I guess we'll report out at the next public meeting.
Correct. And the report out will be just general direction.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so go ahead and open the closed session and move for public comment. Do we describe it? No?
Rebecca, this is a labor negotiation with our organized labor